Welcome to episode 3 of Return Trajectory. This mission, we're launching another unmanned mission. Since we have unlocked some new parts from science, what I want to be able to do is pave the way for future missions. One of ways of doing that is having more resources available while in space. So this particular unmanned mission is headed to Minmus. This is a satellite that is going to scan for more resources for us. Just getting that apoapsis up, separating those engines. Now that we do have fuel lines, it does make it a heck of a lot easier to get payloads into orbit without worrying about really weird looking serial staging and stuff like that. Burning prograde, keeping that apoapsis just in front of us, just like we did our other launches. Luckily, this probe does have plenty of fuel. This stage is almost dry, so what I'm going to have to do here is, if there is any fuel left in this stage before we go orbital, is to dump it back into the atmosphere so we don't have any debris. And the next stage after this one is a transfer stage that does have enough delta V to be able to get to Minmus and do operations. So we did a quick retrograde burn, ejected that, flipped around, burn prograde, back into orbit. And now that we've targeted Minmus, we're gonna burn straight towards it when it's just above the horizon. Or technically below it, since I can't see it yet. And this will get us an encounter eventually. As you can see there. Next thing I'm going to do is adjust my inclination on the way out. It didn't want to particularly cooperate, but it's all good. And what happened is I got to my apoapsis and I didn't get an encounter, so I had to burn prograde basically along the orbit. And I was like, you know what? As soon as I get in orbit around Minmus, I'll just circularize there. This thing is enough delta V to not worry about it. And I got 2 wards for getting in orbit around another planet and getting in orbit around Minmus. One thing that I do want to do for the Kethane scanning satellite is get a 90-degree inclination. That way when I am scanning, just along the terminator line, as you can see it right there where the sunlight goes to the shadows around the planet, that I'm able to have exposure to the sun all the time. And I was having some trouble getting that time warp adjusted just right. And I was trying to get a high enough orbit to where I could time warp quickly, because this does have more than one Kethane scanner on it. And just for future reference for you guys, when you have more than one scanner on a ship, you can actually, oh yeah, I was deploying the satellite here. You can actually scan the planet faster. So I was getting a few readings, but it was basically just from the top. These scanners, I forgot, their maximum range is about 250 kilometers. Plus at this range, as fast as Minmus rotates, I was getting some really weird scanning. So I packed my satellite back up and I changed my orbit some. I think right here I was just like circularizing and stuff. But you can see those pathways on the scan, it's all weird and curved and stuff like that. So I brought it down to about 50 kilometers. And I was just using my orbital HUD here. I wasn't watching the map. So I got 50 kilometers here, and it was all right, but as you can see, I was still missing some stuff at, a decent speed. So I decreased the orbit even further to about 30 kilometers. And then I started scanning. And I was like, okay, that's good. So I just let this sit for about, 30 minutes. And then I came back and I was like, yay, my planet is scanned. And then I was like, well, I still have fuel. And I've got another stage. Let's go ahead and turn those scanners off. Fold this guy back up. Now the goal here was to either get back to Kerbin or, even better, use the same satellite for another mission, since I seem to be having a recurring theme of using spaceships for more than they were intended. So right here, I was just messing around with maneuver nodes. And then I was like, you know what? Get it. We're just going to get to a position where we could burn. Though I think I did use the maneuver node. Yeah, I did. Just to get it into an orbit around Kerbin. And then I messed around with the burns a little bit more. Right here, I was trying to get my inclination matched with the moon. That had this weird orbit. And I was like, you know what? I'll just match my inclination here. So I had to burn south, basically. And since I was this far out, I'm like going like 200 meters a second, it's really easy to make inclination changes. So I'm still outside of the orbit of the moon. I got to my apoapsis and I burned in again. And then I got an encounter. And I was messing around with the orbit. So I was like, whatever, that's good enough. So we came in. And I'm coming in almost exactly along the Terminator line. So I was like, oh, that's awesome. So I just burned south according to the nav ball. Got that 0-degree inclination. And then I increased my apoapsis to about 170. And then I brought it down to, looks like 95. My Kethane scanners weren't on at this point. And then I got in orbit around the moon. And you notice my fuel is pretty low, but hey, I'm in orbit. And with this one, I did decide to get it closer than I did for Minmus, since I did figure out what the scan range was. I was sitting at about 100 kilometers. Gonna go ahead and redeploy the satellite again. Turn the scanner on. Get good solar panel deployment with the sun. Or Kerbal, Kerbol for the name of the sun. And then I just let it sit and scan. So, I mean, if you're sitting here watching it the whole time, it does take time. And I think right here I was just tweaking my orbit to where I was trying to get the North Pole and South Pole to be scanned. That's what it was. Alright, let's go ahead and switch ahead. Ta-da! Fully scanned moon. There we go. Polar orbits are fantastic. And along the Terminator line, you don't miss any. So what we did here is, now that the satellite has been used, we are going to go ahead and deorbit it into the moon. Remember, no space debris, and I didn't think I had enough fuel to actually be able to get back home to have this thing burn up on reentry, so we did the next best thing. I'm gonna crash it into the side of a crater. Incoming! And I tried to slow down, and that's all the fuel I had, so it's a good thing I didn't try to make it back to Kerbin, because I just flat out wouldn't have had enough fuel. So with that done, we're going to be moving on to the Trinity Mark 1. This is our second manned mission and our third, well, fourth flight, technically. Now this mission is going to be going to Minmus. Since the gravity is low, it is a lot easier to deal with the Delta V requirements and stuff, whereas landing on the moon requires significantly more fuel, or at least better engines. Now, as far as life support goes, we've only got enough life support for about 11 days. So this mission needs to do everything that it has to and return home within that time frame. Now, as you can see, I've got this triple tiered construction thing going on, which works really well. We're also doing the temperature scans as well, since we did unlock that science from the last go around. I figured that scanning probe I sent to Minmus wasn't going to be able to get get any science and be able to return home. So we just crashed that one into the surface. So right now we're just getting up to our apoapsis, which I got to about 78 kilometers. And we're starting our insertion burn. Those engines went out, so we ejected them. And I got a nice cinematic shot of my Trinity flying away right there. Then I had to switch back to it before it went out of loading range, because that would have been very bad. Still burning prograde. Our apoapsis is about 79, so we're going to go switch to map view and attempt to keep that apoapsis just in front of us. We're looking for an orbit around, 70, 80 kilometers. That would be nice. But we're getting a bit low on fuel here, so we have to switch back and jettison that and switch to our transfer stage, which is a group of 3 LV909 engines with those T800 fuel tanks. So apoapsis of 80 kilometers, we're going to warp back up to that and burn again. Ta-da, orbit. Alright, next target, Moon, or Minmus, technically. Minmus. And then here I messed around with maneuver nodes. Just trying to get that orbit, but then I was like, you know what, forget it. We'll do it the way we did it last time. We'll just wait until we see it. Gotta remember to pop up on those solar panels because we are using electricity from our Kerbal. We're just gonna go ahead and line up our spaceship with Minmus after we have it targeted. And then when we hit it, we'll just go prograde and basically burn prograde, and that's all you have to do, really. And initiating burn. Full power. And like most burns, we don't want to sit here the whole time. So let's speed up time. And there we go. We're out in our Minmus's orbit. The next thing we're going to do is check our fuel levels, get our Kerbal out, get the temperature scans and stuff that we did on the way up, above the launch pad, upper atmosphere, and orbital. And we get one more, and I was like, oh yeah, I probably got to get that one before we leave. Otherwise, I won't be able to if we're too far away. And for some reason, Minmus got untargeted. So I went to the next ascending node, and I went ahead and burned south. And I got an encounter. Got it nice and at least relatively close. Now, since I haven't gotten the ability to actually use monopropellant engines and stuff like that, if you'll notice on the alternate resource panel right now, I actually don't have any monopropellant. Normally I would have some, even just in the command pod. So it's taken about 2 days to get out to Minmus. We've got about 8 or so days left of life support. So we're gonna do my standard thing. I always like orbiting counterclockwise, basically with an orbit of 90 degrees, just like you would for Kerbin. So we've got our science report from high above, which I actually did recover. So one of my goals was to be able to actually recover the science close to it, but I don't quite remember if I was actually able to get that science or not. So we came in at about 10 kilometers close to Minmus, which is good. 10 kilometers above Minmus, 10 kilometers above um, the moon is generally what I go for in a an orbital achievement or just like a flyby, because I'm not going to hit anything at that altitude. So I did a crew report, and I transmitted that science back. Now, two of the hardest biomes to find on Minmus are the lowlands and the highlands. And generally, I've noticed that the darker areas like this are generally higher altitude. So I was looking for color changes on Minmus's surface to find these particular biomes. Now, a trick that you just saw me do where I got the Kerbal out of the command pod was to actually do an EV report and see what biome he was above. And normally with unmanned probes and stuff, you can do that with the gravity sensors, but I don't have those unlocked yet, so we gotta, use a Kerbal. And that was that transfer state smashing into the surface. We don't want to have any debris. Debris is bad. And we're just coming in for a landing. Nice and slow, using 3 of those itty bitty Rockomax engines. They've got about, I think, 30 units of thrust each. There we go, 30 or 40. And we have officially landed on the moon of Minmus with a manned vehicle. So we're going to get our temperature scan. And we're going to get our crew report and our goo report and our material bay. And those landing gear actually weren't even long enough to even hit the surface. So that was a design failure on my part. We've got our crew report and a surface sample. Look how high I can jump. And the next thing we're going to do is plant our flag. Return trajectory. Now another thing I have going is that we do want to have names on every biome. So planting a flag and labeling it correctly is going to be something that we definitely want to keep doing. So we're going to go ahead and extract our goo report and our material bay and get our science that we've gotten and check all the other ones. And we're going to take off to the next biome. The ship is designed to be able to harvest science from 6 different biomes, which it has 6 material bays and 6 goo canisters. My next destination was this nice little salt lake over here. They could be ice lakes, but I think they're made of salty crystalline structure. We got our crew report. Just checking for more biomes. We're going to be coming down onto the surface since it is nice and flat, and we're next to this nice sloped area. So the plan is to land and then land on the sloped area. Yeah, those landing gear just weren't long enough. I probably should have placed them a little bit further down. But I think what I did is I added those SAS modules for greater control. And I didn't account for the length of the landing gear after I did that, because before it was fine, but after having that mishap, I did do a bit more testing. And we're down to our second landing place. Got our crew report, got our temperature scan, got our goo report and our material bay. Go ahead and get jab out. Get the material bay and goo canister science. Good. Plant our next flag. Bam! Return trajectory. Minmus Flats. Second landing. We really should redesign the landing gear on this thing. I don't think it's working right. Crew report and material study, or surface sample. Gonna tilt towards the mountain. We got those SAS modules keeping us from tipping over too far. It's gonna glide over the surface towards the cliff face. We don't want to smash into the mountainside, believe it or not. We want to land on the mountainside. With all these SAS modules and low gravity, it's not going to be a big deal. Good. Touchdown here. There we go. 2-point landing. But it looks like we're still on the flat, so we got to move up a little bit more. There we go. We'll try landing here. Landing on an inclined surface is not fun. Entertaining? Yes. Fun? No. Alright, we got our next touchdown. And we're in the correct biomes. We're going to take that data, transmit the crew report, get Jeb out, get a surface sample and EPA report, and this happened. He started spinning and sliding. I don't know why, but it happened. And he was going pretty quick across the surface. I was a little bit worried. I thought if he hit the ground too hard, he'd probably die. And that would be a very short career mission for him. We went through a rock and then bounced. He didn't seem to be too happy, but he turned out all right. So we use our jetpack to get all the way back up there again. Plenty of maneuvering thrust available. Gonna come down. There we go. Plant our flag, finally. Turn trajectory. Minmus slopes. Yes, you can, in fact, slide down the slopes on Minmus. And then I started spinning and sliding again. So I was like, fantastic. And then I found out by time accelerating, you can stop the sliding. Super sliding action. Yay. Getting all the data collected from this biome and sliding again. And stopping my slide with the use of physical time warp. I didn't want to hit those panels. I had to be careful while hovering, trying to get the report. Spinning around and sliding again. And getting back onto the command pod. Storing everything, grabbing all the stuff that I needed, getting an EVA report from above the slopes. And then we had to find our next biome. So I kind of just burned in a random direction. And I was like, let's go for that. That looks like, you know, Midlands. Normally I hate the Midlands, but this is the one time I'm actually looking for them. So we're about 7 kilometers up. We got our report and I was like, yeah, Midlands. So we immediately halted our orbit and we came down. Fuel reserves are looking good. We've done 3 landings so far and we still got about half fuel left. And that doesn't even account for the return stage. Popping landing gear out. Not that they'll be much help, but you know, better safe than sorry. Just doing a nice slow descent here. Got that shadow coming in. Those landing lights weren't doing all that much for me, but you know, they worked. They at least lit up the ground. If I had to worry about a shadow landing or landing on the dark side of the surface, then I'd at least have some way of knowing where the ground is. And the next biome is the Minmus Midlands. Getting better at touchdowns, yay! Getting back to the pod, getting back in. And finding the next biome to go to. These little engines are great. They're fantastic for probes. And they're actually more efficient with smaller fuel tanks than the LV909. I mean, the ISP on these engines is like 350, but since the mass is like a fifth of the LV909, your thrust to weight ratio is greatly improved, which does adjust your delta V. Now I'm not using MechJeb or Kerbal Engineer or anything like that. So basically all this stuff I kind of just built and hoped it worked, and it did. So I was happy. This is the Lowlands, I believe. Popping landing gear again. Slowing down. Come on. Getting in on that landing. Had to hover here. Come on. Hover, hover, hover. And touchdown. There we go. Getting the science from this biome. Getting our temperature scan. Getting jab out. Closing those panels just because we don't want to damage the goo canisters that are around those solar panels. And the battery power is not going to go anywhere because we don't have a probe on that one. Getting our surface sample. Deploying our flag. Minmus Lowlands. I didn't even write a comment on that one, did I? Oh well. Off to the next biome. Oh, there's some flats over there. So we're going for another flat zone. So that is 5 landings so far. We've only got one more goo canister and one more material bay to use. Coming down on our final descent. We're running really low on fuel, but we just have to land and we'll be good. Coming in. Come on, land, land, land. A few little last second squirts of power. And touchdown. Awesome. Last goo report, last material bay. Jab out for a above that biome EVA report while on the command pod. Getting that last data from that goo pod and getting the data from the material bay. There we go. Last flag to plant. We got our EVA report and our surface sample. Minmus Greater Flats. I have my pockets full of Minmus ice cream and I'm coming home. I don't know why I took another surface sample, but okay. And I almost hit that solar panel. That would have been bad. Alright, so we've done 6 landings with one ship. What we don't want to do is get into orbit with this stage because it, well, it's out of fuel, so that'll work. And it's got a crashing trajectory. Perfect. Let's go ahead and go to our next stage. I have removed all the science from those 6 modules. That is going to crash into the surface. We're going to activate our next engine. And burn. I had those little waste heat radiators on the bottom of this pod, but I didn't even need them with Interstellar with this. So it looks like even if you're in the shade, your normal solar panels don't tend to overheat too much or have too much waste heat. Nothing really to worry about. I've got enough battery to last me to, at least be able to get home. We've got about 250 charge. And that's good for a couple hours of life expectancy for my Kerbal. So we've got a return trajectory on the Trinity 1 command pod and return vehicle. Now the command pod and the return vehicle does have all of the life support stuff on board, which is a good idea because you don't want to die on the way home because it takes 2 days and command pods only hold about 1. So we're just going to follow this little guy until he hits the surface. Here we go. Stuff survived. Wow. Okay. Let's follow the debris on its journey. Gotta love the low gravity on Minmus. Stuff just goes and goes and goes. Well, that one hit the ground. And there's more stuff. Still more debris. There we go. More debris hitting the ground. Yay. And that was the end of that. No debris left on the surface. Awesome. But we'll return next time, the next episode of Return Trajectory.